Greetings. Jesus is telling us of 4 massive attacks to happen before Jesus comes to rule all nations. Now, Jesus wants those alive in the end times, that's the last days before he returns to earth, to have a countdown checklist of major events before his coming. Knowing about these massive attacks will help people have a greater and greater confidence in the powerful hands of God and Jesus as they control and they guide history's major events. Now, here are the 4 massive attacks. We have giant Arab-Israeli war. Most people are expecting a giant Arab-Israeli war to happen. Then the second massive event, second massive attack, 2 great militaries on planet Earth today are destroyed. The third massive attack, Satan's trumpet number 5. We'll get into that in a little bit. Fourth massive attack, a 200 million man army kills 1/3 of mankind. Now that is a massive attack. So God is guiding history's events towards the God-chosen finish line, which is the 3.5-year tribulation, followed by Jesus becoming earth's new king, ruling all nations in peace and abundance. That's where God has allowed and is planning this to be. And then, after the tribulation, then we will know, or during the tribulation, we're going to know that Jesus is about to enter planet Earth's atmosphere and take rule and control of the planet. God reveals to us that these 4 massive attacks are about to happen soon. The first of these massive attacks is a World War III sized attack against Israel and a counterattack against many Middle Eastern nations shown to us in Daniel 11:41. Daniel 11:40 shows this massive attack occurs at the time of the end. That's at the time of the end. That's verse 40. Go to verse 41. Daniel 11:41. And he shall enter the glorious land in Bible language, that's Israel. Why? To protect it. And, the rest of the verse, many nations, many countries shall be overthrown. So what is the picture that it's painting here? And he, in verse 41, has to be a super powerful military to be able to overthrow and capture many countries. You can't do that with a tiny little army. Verse 42, and he, the king of the north, shall stretch out his hand against the countries, the many countries, and Egypt shall not escape. So now we know the name of one of those many Middle Eastern nations. Verse 43, and he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and also the Libyans and Ethiopians. So now we have 3 names of 3 nations, of the many nations who are going to be overthrown and captured. In World War II, Hitler invaded and captured many nations in Europe, and he took total control of those nations. This is what Jesus indicates will happen to the many Middle Eastern nations in this massive attack number 1. So we should ask, why would this powerful leader, the king of the north, enter Israel and then overthrow many Arab nations? Why would he do that? Well, our recent history gives us a glimpse of how this kind of thing happens. In August of 1990, right, Kuwait was invaded and overthrown by Saddam Hussein of Iraq. Well, then many nations sent their soldiers and they entered Kuwait. Kuwait had been overthrown. The enemy soldiers, the Iraqi soldiers, were in Kuwait. They'd taken control of Kuwait. And so these many nations went over there, went into Kuwait and drove the Iraqi forces out of Iraq. And that's similar to what will be happening here in the Middle East in this first massive attack. Jesus showed Daniel that the Arab nations would fail to destroy Israel. Okay, massive attack number 2 is shown in Daniel 11:40, right? Which comes immediately after the Arab nations suffer defeat. So it comes right on the heels of the first massive attack. We only get one verse to describe it, Daniel 11:44. But news from the east and the north, you have to stop a minute and you go, okay, from verse 41, 2, and 3, where is this mighty military power that's overthrown these Middle Eastern nations? Where is he located? Where is the war taking place? It's all around Jerusalem, because he entered Israel to save Israel from the Arab attack, right? So Jerusalem is the center point, and it says news from the east and the north of Jerusalem will trouble them. Now all you got to do is look at a world map, put your finger on Jerusalem, go straight north, and that'll give you the clue of who the military to the north is. Go to Jerusalem, go east, and that'll give you the clue the other military shall trouble him. They do something that troubles this mighty, powerful military leader. Therefore, he shall go out, notice this, very few words, but very telling words, with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. Who are we talking about? Of those in the militaries north of Jerusalem and east of Jerusalem. So that was attack number 2. Now we go to attack number 3, which follows verse 44. We have this second massive attack. Then comes verse 45. Then one more verse, Daniel 12:1, introduces the tribulation period as beginning. And that brings us to massive attack number 3. Daniel 12:1 says, at that time. At what time? At the time of the 2 great militaries being destroyed. One verse more, then it says, at that time there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. Now, that's the same kind of language that Jesus uses in Matthew 24 to show a time of trouble that's never been so great, and that is the Great Tribulation. So massive attack number 3 is the first woe, or the 7th trumpet, and it's Satan's trumpet number 5, and we'll see the details in Revelation 9:1. It says, the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Bible language, that's where Satan gets locked up from time to time. The bottomless pit, that's his prison, right? And he gets released. Verse 2, he opened the bottomless pit. Verse 3, and then out of the pit came locusts upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions. So they have scorpion power. Verse 5, and they were not given authority to kill men, but to torment men for 5 months. Now this is a massive attack against those who are going to be stung by a scorpion-like sting. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. Verse 6, and in those days men will seek death. Now I don't know how you would try to explain this, but I can't really explain it. It's God has written it. This will happen when it's on your TV sets. You're going to know that's what this is. This is massive attack number 3. They will seek death and not find it. What? You go 5 months in pain and torture and agony from a scorpion sting, and you can't die, you can't commit suicide, you can't stop eating and die, you can't find a way to die. And they will desire to die, and death will flee from them. Now, think how horrible this would be if it was you suffering 5 months worth of scorpion sting and not be able to do anything about it. Verse 10, then they had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and they had power to hurt men 5 months. God kind of emphasizes it over and over a little bit here. Verse 11, and they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit. Satan. It brings us back to Satan is in charge of this third massive attack. Doesn't tell us who it is, but men are being tormented for 5 months. And those, it says, the bottomless pit, whose name is in the Hebrew Abaddon, whose Greek has the name Apollyon, and these are just other names for Satan, the devil. So, verse 12 of Revelation 9, the one woe is past. That's trumpet number 5. So that's woe number 1. Satan's trumpet number 5 is woe number 1. Now we come to the fourth massive attack. Revelation 9:13, and the sixth angel sounded, and the sixth trumpet was also the second woe, in verse 16. Now, the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million, and most people stagger at that. Even today, they go, well, what nation can put together a 200 million man army? Well, what if it's a multitude of nations? There's 1.6 billion Muslims, and there are 1.5 billion Chinese, and there are 1.4 Indian nation, in India, people, right? But you can put together multiple nations and come up with a 200 million man army. And John says, I heard the number. So he's writing this, and I guess he's going, so if people reading this think, well, how do I know there was 200 million? That's a big number. And then he says, I heard the number. Somebody, maybe an angel whispered in his ear, but he was told, this is a massive army of 200 million men, right? Verse 17, and thus I saw the horses in vision, and those that sat on them, and the heads of the horses, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. Verse 18, by these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. Now, just stop a minute and think, however many people are still alive after these other massive attacks, right? By the time we get to the fourth massive attack, say the population of planet Earth is cut in half. Okay, so now a third of what's left, that half, is going to be killed by the beast powers, 200 million man army. So that fourth massive attack is guided by Satan, who's guiding the Hitler-like beast person, and for whatever reason, we're not told all the details, he feels a need to go out and kill probably those who disagree with him, which ends up being like a third of mankind, which is a massive attack when you stop and think about it. Jesus wants us to know that after these four massive attacks, he becomes king over all nations. Then he brings peace and abundance to mankind for 1,000 years.